Hello, everyone. My name is Lance, and today I'm going to be disproving the claim that daily creatine use is dangerous to physical health. Let's get started with talking about what creatine is, the supplement, and the compound that naturally occurs in our body. So, the naturally occurring creatine is synthesized from arginine, glycine, and methionine in the pancreas and kidneys. The AGAT enzyme converts arginine and glycine into guanidinoacetate acetate in the liver and pancreas. The GAMT enzyme methylates this, and guanidinoacetate acetate, after it's methylated, is turns into creatine. This creatine is then released into the bloodstream and can be stored in muscle tissue or the brain. However, 95% of that creatine is going to be stored in skeletal muscle as phosphocreatine, which is what I will be referring to it as for the duration of this presentation. Creatine could also be found through red meat and fish, but our body naturally creates about 1 to 2 grams of creatine per day. So the most common creatine supplements on the market that you could buy today are creatine monohydrate, which is the most studied and, in my experience, the most affordable. You may have seen micronized creatine, which is just creatine monohydrate with smaller particles that dissolve better in liquid. And as I say here in the presentation, creatine monohydrate is likely the most widely used creatine supplement on the market. You may also see creatine HCl. The HCl is just there to help with digestion and solubility, and supposedly it is less upsetting to some people's stomachs. And also, some people have claimed that creatine HCl gets rid of that bloating that happens during the loading phase, which we'll talk about, which is likely not true. Anecdotal. It's likely anecdotal. So, what does creatine do in our body and how does it work? Creatine helps regenerate adenosine triphosphate, which is our body's primary molecule used to store and transport energy. My biology professor used to call it the currency of the cell. And muscle contractions use up this ATP and it becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and a byproduct, an inorganic phosphate byproduct. Phosphocreatine donates its phosphate group to ADP to rapidly regenerate ATP. This is catalyzed by an enzyme called kinase, and this can result in about a 3 to 15-second increase of intense effort to anaerobic exercises, meaning you may be able to increase your sprints or, do a couple more reps of deadlift. Uh, Neurons also use phosphocreatine to maintain ATP during cognitive stress or during low oxygen exercises. So, again, anaerobic exercises. Um, Creatine monohydrate, however, does not start out as phosphocreatine. When you ingest creatine monohydrate, it takes a phosphate group from ATP, turning it into ADP, and then is stored as phosphocreatine or free creatine in the muscle, like the creatine produced in our body. And during anaerobic exercise or intense effort, this then could be used. That phosphate group can be plucked off by creatine kinase and given back to ADP so that the cycle is kind of cut short and ATP can be then used again by our muscle. This kind of creates, like I said, an energy buffer or a reservoir of energy. It basically speeds up the regeneration of ATP. Um, I have a point here saying that creatine kinase, the enzyme that takes the phosphate group from ATP and puts it on creatine monohydrate, is also the same enzyme that catalyzes the removal of that phosphate group from phosphocreatine and putting it back on ADP. Um, Oddly enough, it does take a little bit of energy once you um, ingest creatine monohydrate to turn it into phosphocreatine, but it's a negligible amount. I just wanted to mention that. And lastly, creatine supplementation usually does begin with a loading phase of about 5 to 20 grams per day, which seems like a lot. But if you are okay with having your loading phase be a month long, you could get away with taking 5 to 10 grams a day. But if you want your loading phase to be short, you want that you want the um, concentrations of creatine in your muscle to be increased over a short period of time, like a week, then you're probably going to be taking about 20 grams per day. Your maintenance dose or your daily dose is going to be around 5 grams a day. Usually it's suggested to just take one scoop, which is 5 grams. This is important for running, sprinting, compound lifts, and fighting. So, what does supplementation do? Supplementation simply increases the concentration of creatine from 120 millimoles per kilogram to 160 millimoles per kilogram. And like I said, this aids in more rapid ATP regeneration. This can increase strength, power, and eventually muscle mass. And it could also aid in endurance during high intensity training. And it could help you decrease your recovery time between workouts, meaning you could increase your training volume. So if you want to hit the gym another day a week, you can. And it's also been shown to improve cognitive function in healthy individuals over the age of 65. I believe that the uh, group of individuals was 66 to 76. That's where they saw the best cognitive increase. Um, if you are a healthy individual and you're younger, in your 20s, it probably won't have a marked increase um, or improvement on your cognitive function, but it's still useful for physical function. What does supplementation not do? So, a lot of people claim that it damages your kidneys, it damages your liver, it causes dehydration. Some people say that it could increase your core temperature during exercise. So, according to research on long term creatine supplementation, it does not result in renal damage. It does not show adverse liver or kidney biomarkers. It does not induce dehydration in healthy individuals. And it does not decrease heat tolerance and increase core temperature. In fact, in a study on college athletes exercising in the heat, this quote says, "No evidence supports this concept that creatine supplementation either hinders the body's ability to dissipate heat or negatively affects the athlete's body fluid balance. Controlled experimental trials of athletes exercising in the heat resulted in no adverse effects from creatine supplementation at recommended doses." Okay, so this brings us to our conclusion. Creatine supplementation has not been linked to adverse health side effects, so the claim is wrong. And there's a caveat. This is for short-term and long-term usage, by the way. There's a caveat. This is in healthy individuals. If you have a pre-existing health condition, especially relating to kidneys, pancreas, or liver, please consult your doctor before you start any supplementation, but especially creatine supplementation. All right, that's it. I hope this was informational and helpful. And take a creatine.